In the 1990s, then Disney CEO Michael Eisner wanted Disney everywhere. In cities like New York, which is what brought us Disney on Broadway. In countries like France, which is what brought us Euro Disney. And even in your local mall, which is what brought us his most technologically advanced idea yet. A virtual theme park that was supposed to change entertainment forever. But instead, it became one of Disney's biggest flops. This is the story of DisneyQuest. I'm Mel1, and for my full-time job, I'm a director of product management. So today, I'm putting on my tech hat to talk about why and how DisneyQuest, one of Disney's most technologically forward experiences ever, failed. Michael Eisner became Disney CEO in 1984, and from the beginning, he was focused on growth and expansion. From parks to films to cruises to retails to Broadway, Eisner literally wanted Disney to be everywhere. Specifically, he and the Disney company as a whole were looking for ways to extend the Disney brand beyond its resorts and into people's everyday lives. And so in the mid-1990s, this led to the creation of Disney Regional Entertainment. Its purpose was to bring Disney experiences to local markets so that families didn't have to travel to Orlando or Anaheim. And the things they built were meant to be smaller scale than theme parks, but still uniquely Disney. And so their plan was to build what they called modular entertainment centers, which would have mid-range build costs of $30 to $40 million compared to a full-scale theme park. Their first experiment was something called Club Disney, and the first location opened in 1997 in Thousand Oaks, California. These were indoor play centers located in suburban malls aimed at kids 12 and under. Think a high-end Disney-fied Chuck E. Cheese. They featured interactive playrooms with ball pits and slides, character meet and greets, sing-alongs, dance activities like Pooh Robics and Lion King Limbo, birthday party rentals, and craft zones. And Disney envisioned expanding this nationwide. They wanted to have over 100 locations located in suburban malls throughout the country. But in reality, only 5 ever opened, and the concept failed within 2 years. Parents found it too expensive, too limited in appeal, and lacking repeat value. And the locations therefore saw poor attendance, with some receiving only 1,000 visitors when tens of thousands had been projected. So Club Disney quickly failed, but it showed that Disney was committed to trying localized entertainment experiences. Around this same time, virtual reality was hyped as the next big thing. Of course, 30 plus years later, looking back, it's a little bit ironic because VR is still sort of being hyped as the next big thing. But anyways, at this time, VR arcades and simulator rides were being touted as the next phase of entertainment and were popping up in malls everywhere. And so yes, Disney was interested in pursuing VR as well, but at this point, there are sort of 2 arms to the story. The first is probably what you'd expect. Eisner was intrigued by VR's ability to create what he thought of as portable Disney rides, immersive experiences that could fit inside of a building rather than acres of land. He saw it as the next evolution of storytelling meets technology and wanted to be on the forefront. But there's also a second arm to that story that's not exactly verified, but probably fairly likely. Because a few years before Disney started going down this path, a video game company called Sega was doing the same, and they announced that they wanted to put malls into arcades, specifically by creating standalone VR experiential places, similar to Dave & Buster's, but with a heavy focus on virtual reality. And they wanted a partner who could help lead the creative side, so they teamed up with DreamWorks. Ultimately, this partnership was called GameWorks, and the two opened 30 locations over the next 20 years. But here's where Disney comes into the picture. DreamWorks was founded by the former head of Walt Disney Studios, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who'd been ousted from the Disney company a year earlier due to issues with Eisner. And this was notoriously a very, very messy fallout. If you're interested in this lore, there's a really great book called Disney War that outlines a lot of this, but basically, Eisner refused to promote Katzenberg despite his success, wouldn't give him any royalties, and ultimately forced him out, later causing Katzenberg to actually sue the Disney company. And so there was a lot of animosity between these two. And this was also around the time that things started going downhill for Michael Eisner. His very close business partner and Disney COO Frank Wells had recently tragically died in a helicopter accident. Euro Disney was literally failing, and he'd been ousted from the state of Virginia with his attempt to build the Disney's America theme park, which we have a full deep dive on if you're not familiar. But so Eisner was sort of spiraling and he needed a win. And Eisner was also notoriously competitive and perhaps a little bit spiteful. So while yes, VR was incredibly popular, and yes, it probably did make sense for Disney to invest in it, It's also highly probable that Eisner saw this as an opportunity to go back up against Katzenberg and win. And so, through those series of events, it was decided that Disney would invest in VR-focused local experiences. In the mid-90s, DisneyQuest was announced as an indoor interactive theme park concept. It was shrouded in a lot of secrecy, and given that the building was literally a windowless box, the public didn't know much about it prior to opening. But on June 19, 1998, its flagship location in downtown Disney opened its doors. And in case you never had the pleasure, and I mean that, of visiting DisneyQuest, let's take a look at what was inside. First of all, it literally was a windowless box of a building. This was intentional, as part of the pitch was that this made it easier to replicate in other cities. More on this soon. And essentially, inside this windowless box was 100,000 square feet of gaming and VR attractions. Visitors entered via the Cyber Elevator, hosted by Genie from Aladdin, which magically transported them to a third-floor atrium called the Venture Port. And from here, guests were able to explore the 4 themed zones of DisneyQuest. The first was the Explore Zone, which featured 3 attractions. Aladdin's Magic Carpet Ride, one of the earliest VR headset experiences where guests would fly through Agrabah. Hercules in the Underworld, where guests had to guide carts to save baby Hercules. And Virtual Jungle Cruise, where guests would sit in inflatable rafts and had to paddle physical oars while slamming into dinosaurs and floating down a river. Next was the Create Zone, our family's personal favorite. The flagship attraction here was Cyberspace Mountain, where you could design your own roller coaster and then ride on it in a simulator hosted by Bill Nye. But it also included a lot of different attractions where you could create things. There was a Classic Animation Academy where you could learn to draw Disney characters, Sid's Create a Toy inspired by Toy Story where you could digitally design a Frankenstein toy and then actually buy it later, Living Easels, again this let you digitally create art and then purchase it afterwards, Magic Mirror where guests could take a picture of themselves and then edit it to look like a cartoon, and one of our favorites, the Radio Disney Song Maker, which we still have one of the CDs from with a song that my brother made called Boys Are Better Than Girls Are. Next up was the Score Zone. This had another VR headset attraction called Ride the Comics, where guests could battle against comic book villains. Invasion, where guests would pilot a spaceship and have to save other people from an alien planet. And the Mighty Ducks Pinball Slam, where you stood on a giant platform in order to move virtual pinballs on a screen. And the last zone was the Replay Zone. This had an attraction called Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters, where guests would sit in a bumper-style car and shoot each other with Nerf balls. And it also had hundreds of classic and modern arcade-style games. Our favorite was one called Q*bert that our dad would play as a kid, as well as other classic arcade games like pinball machines and skee-ball. And then, of course, also included in DisneyQuest was shopping and dining, including their Food Quest restaurant and the Wonderland Cafe. Now remember, DisneyQuest was part of Disney Regional Entertainment, so it was never meant to just stay in Orlando. So a year later, on June 16, 1999, a second location opened in Chicago. The goal here was to capture what Disney called the urban market, including people who may never visit Disney World or Disneyland. But Chicago was the only other DisneyQuest that ever opened, and 2 years later, in September 2001, it closed. So what happened? First of all, Chicago was already full of entertainment options, so DisneyQuest had a lot to compete with. And it was considered pricey compared to local attractions or even other arcades. DisneyQuest was also being marketed to families, but was located in downtown Chicago, an area known for its heavy nightlife, and an area that was notoriously challenging to park in, making this a tough visit for suburban families. The operational costs of DisneyQuest were expensive, especially with the promise of consistent updates. More on this in a moment. But without those consistent updates, which spoiler alert, never came, once you played the games once or twice, there wasn't enough new content to justify coming back regularly. And in general, Disney Regional Entertainment was struggling. Club Disney had already flopped. Their ESPN Zone venture was expensive to run, and DisneyQuest Chicago was the first non-Disney location for this experience, so there was a lot of pressure. And unfortunately, it turned out that it just wasn't a broadly appealing destination for these suburban families, which made it a challenge to attract enough visitors, especially when school was in session. And so after 2 years of continuous low ticket sales, Disney cut its losses and closed its doors. And that marked the end of DisneyQuest's venture into regional venues. Construction had already begun on a Philadelphia location, but it was halted, and ultimately that spot was turned into a parking lot. Another DisneyQuest had been announced in downtown Toronto, but it was immediately canceled. And a location in Disneyland never moved past the planning stage. And so DisneyQuest became a Walt Disney World only attraction, which meant that Disney Regional Entertainment handed over operations to the Walt Disney World team. Now, let's circle back to one of Chicago's biggest challenges, the promise of consistent updates. Because a key part of the pitch for DisneyQuest was that it would be ever-changing. Disney advertised that 75% of DisneyQuest attractions would be updated every 18 months, marking a key differentiator between it and classic VR mall arcades. But this absolutely never came to be. In fact, most attractions at DisneyQuest remained exactly the same for its nearly 2-decade run. A few attractions were just explicitly closed over the years, like the Create Zone's Magic Mirrors. And an attraction was fully changed out only once. In preparation for the opening of DisneyQuest Chicago, the Hercules attraction was swapped out for one called Pirates of the Caribbean Battle for Buccaneer Gold, a 3D projection attraction where one guest would steer a pirate ship while others shot cannons at enemy ships. But that was it. There were not other updates made to DisneyQuest attractions. So why wasn't this promise fulfilled? Well, first of all, this was probably an overcommitment by the team to begin with. From a technical perspective, keeping up with that promise would have been very challenging even with the correct resourcing. But the other main issue was that there was supposed to be a whole chain of DisneyQuests around the country funding new attractions. But ultimately, there was only the one, which meant that there wasn't the profits or the budget to afford making changes to really any of the attractions. So unfortunately for Disney, without the consistent updates, by the mid-2000s, home gaming consoles had pretty much surpassed the tech at DisneyQuest. Think about something like the Wii, which was released during this time. That technology was far sleeker and far more advanced than the bulky VR headsets that Disney was still using at DisneyQuest, which were often really glitchy and uncomfortably heavy. And so, as more accessible technology became better and better, DisneyQuest began to fall more and more behind. And without those consistent updates, this meant that DisneyQuest began to see a steady decline in attendance. The theme parks were seen as a much better option than what guests considered to be a dated arcade. And so DisneyQuest became seen as a notorious rainy day option, and was sometimes offered as an added promotional value to guests with certain ticket types. But it was never able to find a real footing. And then, when the rebrand of Downtown Disney to Disney Springs began, the giant blue 90s aesthetic building did not fit in with the story that they were trying to tell. And so on June 30th, 2015, it was finally announced that DisneyQuest would close the following year. It actually didn't close the following year, but it only held on a bit longer, until July 7th, 2017, when it officially closed its doors to make way for the also ill-fated NBA experience. Now, once it closed, the DisneyQuest building really didn't sit abandoned for that long, but it did for a bit. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the urban explorers who snuck inside during this time. As a disclaimer, we absolutely do not condone this, and you should never do anything like this because you will definitely get a lifetime ban. But it did lead to some pretty amazing and pretty creepy footage of this once futuristic, technologically advanced place kind of frozen in time. The footage you're seeing now was taken by notorious Disney urban explorer Matt Sansois, who literally has like 6 lifetime bans, so again, do not ever do this. But moving beyond that, DisneyQuest today is seen as a fascinating but flawed experiment because it represented a moment when Disney was trying to bottle the theme park experience into something smaller and more packageable to local markets. And honestly, that's an enticing proposition. But ultimately, it failed due to Disney's inability to keep up with rapidly changing technology, something they still struggle with today, coupled with heavy overpromises on updates. And in addition to being a poor fit in urban markets like Chicago, at the end of the day, nothing compares to a true Disney theme park experience. However, DisneyQuest was a favorite for our family, and we went every year. And while some people look back on it as a true dated arcade, a lot of fans, such as myself, look back on it with a lot of nostalgia. And I truly wish so badly that Disney could have kept up with the original vision, because I would literally kill to have a regional DisneyQuest located near me today. That's all I have for you today, but if you love Disney parks, Disney history, Disney secrets, facts, and lore, follow us because we release new videos every single Monday. And we also have our new podcast called Sisters, which releases every Thursday and talks about Disney history in addition to our own experiences in the parks and some fun life stories. For now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!